terrorism, although at the present time, this Nigerian bomber showed us that all the time people keep talking about all those dots and connecting them, and how intelligence services do or do not work together, and how this simple little thing, his name is hard to spell, hard to pronounce, but you remember that the main reason the visa was not cancelled was a lowly State Department employee who could not spell his name and spelt his name wrong, and therefore no action could have been taken. And even if we could have put those dots together, even if the services had worked together, nothing could have been done. Obama has built upon the Bush administration's efforts to combat terrorism, and someone who has reviewed the Operations Center, this is the National Counter-Terrorism Center, he says that it looks a lot like the set from the TV show 24, and with dozens of analysts from an alphabet soup of agencies known by their acronyms: CIA, FBI, DOD, NSA, DIA, DHS, DNI, TSA. I've got some more, but I'll leave them out. And they are sifting through surveillance videos, intercepted telephone calls, satellite imagery, reports from the field, news accounts, and other intelligence streams as they are known. And so all these efforts are going on, and efforts not only here, but I looked at the recent United Nations efforts where they are trying to see that money laundering stops, where they have now a counter-terrorism office where all the world's countries have got to report. They have got committees, they have got commissions. All those efforts around the world are going on. And these acronyms, US and UN, both of them have got a wonderful work of those acronyms of no consequence. But I do remember one of my good friends who were at one time the director of a United Nations agency called UNITAR, United Nations Institute for Training and Research. And it used to get a lot of money from the United States. And a senator from New York, probably you remember Jacob Javits. Some of you do remember him. He was the one who was chairing the session. And this director, a friend of mine, he went in seeking some money. And as he started talking, Senator Javits looked up and he said, what is UNIRAT doing? So he had transposed those words, UNITAR to UNIRAT. And this poor guy standing there, he started calling his own agency UNIRAT because he didn't want to offend the senator. And then one of the senator's aides whispered in his ears, and he said, "It's UNITAR, not UNIRAT." And he said, "Oh, rats, UNITAR." But the point simply is that all these efforts are going on. But I want to conclude by saying, where do we go from here? What do we do? And I think the responses that we have at the present time through the United States, United Nations, other countries, there has to be a military response. There is no way around it. Because that use of violence and force, suicide bombers around, you saw this week in Kabul, close to the seat of the government, in the only mall that they have, close to the hospitals, they had flurry of those accidents and flurry of those bombs. And these kind of assaults have continued. So they needed to be responded to, and therefore the military response is appropriate. But at the same time, we need to ask, in the long term, how do we have this kind of struggle to continue? And here I've got a very few things that all of you probably would agree with me, and that is that this kind of total lack of understanding of different cultures, not being able to sit together and live together. I think not able to have cultures and religions understand each other. And here you remember a few years ago when the clash of civilizations was brought to our attention, that there are all these Hindus and Muslims and Jews and Christians, and all these cultures are going to collide and they are going to fight each other. And the answer at that time also, and today also, in this age of culture, this terrorism, is that we need somehow to be able to teach, and how we teach it to our own children, and how in our own schools, through our educational institutions, churches and temples and mosques, and how through our educational institutions we give that message. And the message is that differences are there. We acknowledge them, that differences count, but those differences ought not to lead in order to have total alienation, and the only answer being to use violence in order to have any differences and any disputes resolved. And in order to do that, I think the only answer that that comes to my mind is that in our own homes, in schools, in our religious and educational institutions of higher learning, that we need to make sure that tolerance is there, that they are taught from the very beginning, these kids, from kindergarten and before that human rights, that these kind of values that you and I cherish, that those values become a part of the curriculum, that values become a part of their life, values become that they live all their lives, and that they do not simply tolerate, but they can celebrate those differences. How do we make it happen is something that you and I need to think about. And as you are there, and I know many, many of you, that in your own heart, in your soul, in your very being, is that desire to create a world that is peaceful, a world that can live with differences, a world that tomorrow you and I want to leave to our own children and grandchildren. And in that, I think as leaders of this community and everywhere as Rotarians, we need to make sure that that happen. Talking about hearts and minds and winning them, that is not a slogan. In order to make it a reality, and in order to make sure that this terrorism, which is a menace, not only in Afghanistan and Pakistan, but all over the world, in order to beat that, the only thing that can be done is to create those kind of values that have been part of our lives in this country. And I want to make sure that we do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel so humbled, and I'm so, so grateful to each one of you for your friendship, for your kindness, for your generosity. And as I keep hearing day after day how much our World Community Service, how much our own Rotary Foundation, how much our own International Foundation does, and as you and I, travel around the world, and on this screen, even in the airplane, comes that message that Rotary has done it. Rotary is fighting polio. I feel very fortunate to be a member of this club, and I want to thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Ved. And we feel fortunate to have you as part of this club as well.
May I take a question?
We have a minute or two. Is there a question for Ved? Don't be shy. All the way in the back here.